How would I fix childcare in the United States? What would I do in terms of federal policy to make it more affordable, more accessible, higher quality, better performing overall? I was asked this by a think tank, quite earnestly, and I did the like typical economist thing by coming back snarky and saying I don't think it's a good question because it implies that the problem is with childcare when I think the problem is so much bigger than childcare. This think tank absolutely took a chance on me, and last month the Roosevelt Institute published my proposal for what I call the child development system. It's already, made an impact. I've spoken to, multiple members of Congress about it, or, their staff, which is what matters. And so I hope you'll stick around and let me explain to you what I would do. But I do have to make a couple public service announcements. Any discussion of what the federal government can do to make childcare easier for families has been effectively derailed by a straw man argument about what is the role for motherhood in the United States. We want to do something so that families don't have to spend so much money on childcare because the market's in failure, but we ended up talking about whether or not it's okay that women stay home at all. That's a values-based conversation. We will never have consensus or uniformity because there's over 300 million people in America, and we don't think the same way, we don't operate the same way, we don't have the same beliefs, and we don't make the same choices. And so we basically put an incredible, unfixable obstacle in front of the conversation about childcare, and you need to put it aside. Other announcement is just a recognition that it is very hard to be creative and ambitious from a place of insecurity. It takes a certain degree of confidence, which is what most people lack in their own individual childcare arrangement or experience. You hold on white-knuckled to something that you're afraid you're going to lose. You're not always open for the type of big sweeping changes that can combine. So you need to take all your insecurities about how hard it was for you to find childcare, how hard childcare is, and how scary it is to move on from the present, and put them over here. And now we can talk about how to go big. So if childcare is not the problem, what is? The problem is that the K through 12 public school system will never expand and the labor market will never pull back. Schools start at age 5. They end by 3 or 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and they break for a couple months in the summer. The labor market is never going to cohere with that schedule. It won't give you a 5-year break. It won't stop at 3 o'clock, and it won't stop for a few months in the summertime. You have an absolute gaping hole between where families can send their kids from school and what the labor market expects from workers. And that's just under the generous interpretation that most of the labor market operates 9 to 5, when we know a lot of it doesn't. What the U.S. economy needs, and the problem that needs to be fixed, is filling the gap between the K through 12 public school system and the labor market. Now, I think if you're going to fill this gap, you ought to fill it with intention. Like if we're going to find another place to keep kids safe for all of these gap times during the day, during the year, during their lives, we should make it into a vertically integrated development system that focuses on the growth of children. Like we want to fill that gap with purpose. Now, I think it's worth noting that the economy can need something that people within it don't. The economy needs this gap to be filled, because the private market to fill the gap has failed. And for what it's worth, we've had private childcare in the US basically in the same form that we've had it now for about 80 years. I mean, ever since Congress pulled back on federal funding for childcare at the end of World War II, we've basically had the private system we've had now. So we've had 80 years for the market to prove it's not going to fill this gap. And in fact, it's going to get worse over time because it's becoming more expensive and less accessible and less reliable. So the economy needs this gap filled. Whether or not families within the economy choose to take advantage of it is almost a secondary question. It's not about assigning a need for every family. It's diagnosing a need within our economy. We need to fill this gap. So how would it work? I think the easiest way to describe it is to take the all the president's men approach and follow the money. So basically, Congress decides it's going to fund a child development system, and it creates 2 really big pots of money. One of them is to pay for provision of care. It's basically a fund to pay providers who provide child care after school or summer, and the other is a capital fund to expand the system that we currently have. That money goes down to providers via some type of lead agency. Now, this is like kind of getting into like the nuances of public policy and deep parlance, but basically a lead agency is someone who takes money from the federal government and distributes it according to the law, in their area. So you can think of it as like the COO of a child development system is someone who sends all the money to providers in their area, diagnoses things like we don't have enough childcare centers on the east side of town and need to build more, basically fills in the gap and oversees performance and maintenance. So they get the money, they distribute it out. Providers, have to meet some type of minimum requirement of, safety, licensing, according with the local restrictions and local preferences. They've got to meet some quality standards, but basically they open their doors, families enroll, they take the kids, whether it's for childcare or after school or summer, and then they just bill up to the lead agency that bills up to the federal government for the care provided. The primary features of the system is that it takes advantage of what we already have. We have a distributed network of private providers across geographies in the United States. They just charge way too much money and there's not enough of them, and we can do more for quality. So this system basically takes that, amps it up with a lot of amps it up with a lot of federal money, augments it, and then expands outward for families. So what could be a child care provider? Well, it's every child care, after school, and summer provider currently in the space, but it would expand to say, houses of worship, employers, large employers, small employers, a confederation of employers. They set up some kind of child development site. It could be public schools, public programs, city park services, museums, libraries. It could be a mom and pop shop. It could be a house on your street. As long as you meet the qualifications for being part of the child development system, you can be reimbursed for the care you provide. The massive wins to this system are numerous, right? It's, think of the employers like police departments and hospitals. They don't run 9 to 5. I mean, they run closer to 7 to 7, and there's no child care center that runs 7 to 7. You can build child care center tailored to these specialized workforces. You can think of people who work in this system actually getting a decent wage because the reimbursement rate dictates higher pay. The reimbursement rate can also invest in things like more education and skills training for the workforce. I mean, it has huge benefits for communities who basically get to endow institutions within their own communities to becoming a more entrenched part of families and children's lives. You have a community center, it has a space, but now it gets the type of money to create all kinds of programming for children and really establish themselves in children's lives in a way that we think would be beneficial. And it helps public schools because now you have, you're taking some of the burden that's been put on public schools over the last 20 years to expand their programming for things like socio-emotional learning and have a nice place to complement it. Parents, for what it's worth, when you're not talking about childcare, parents love this. Parents love after school. They love summer camp. You can fail a science class, but you can't fail space camp. You can fail a test on Shakespeare, but you can't fail an after school program that's, at a local theater where your kid learns to act and maybe gets a little bit of confidence on the stage. I mean, they want a place for their kids to be outside of the classroom, but still learning in a guided way, getting mentors, getting that sense of community. I mean, they love things like this. They just can't always afford it or have access to it. So you're kind of amping up what we know parents already love, which is giving their kids a place to learn and grow and take the burden off of the public school system to have to do it all. What I wanted to stress in this video is that we can do this a couple of ways. But if we think about having a 0 to 18 development system for kids, we can tackle things like depression and loneliness and anxiety and lack of confidence and isolation. We can tackle those head on because we've created a massive network integrated in communities that have the ability to help kids where they are and meet kids where they are. We can do so much more than we're currently doing as long as we dream big and go big.